We'll move out about 5 clicks and establish a series of overwatch positions along the road. We know the Jaguars have got to follow it. There's no other way around these mountains, at least none any of the scouts could find, nah? He tapped his right forefinger against the faintly glowing display screen of Winston's map box. If we sight them properly, we should be able to see the enemy a long time before he is able to see us. Winston agreed. Given the terrain and the average speed of a mech moving over bad ground, that would give us about 30 minutes warning. It would give us far more than that, General, Ryan countered. My unit has 2 intact and functioning tag designators. I know your Eridani Lighthorse has at least 3 mechs equipped with Aero 4 launchers, as well as a pair of Chaparral missile tanks fitted with the same weapon. I suspect the comm guards have at least a few similarly armed units, and I understand that the one type of ammunition that is still in relatively good supply is Aero 4 guided missiles. I suggest that my men and I could designate targets for your Aero 4s. Flipping through the 2750 technical readout, it would be sacrilege to deny that the line art in it for the vehicles is fantastic. Many of the drawings reflected a sleeker and streamlined design philosophy which demonstrated the fall from grace that technology suffered during the succession wars. While many of the tanks and mechs of the 3025 TRO era look cool in their own right, the 2750 technology has a certain distinct style. One of the better examples of this is the Chaparral, a 50-ton tracked tank which looks more like a concept vehicle than a purveyor of ranged death and destruction. It first rolled off the production lines in 2611 and was intended to fill a fire support gap that existed in the SLDF between the LRM firing units and longer-range artillery like the Long Tom and Thumper. The name Chaparral is a noun with a Spanish etymology which describes a thicket of dense undergrowth. Constructed around a Nissan 200 Diffusion engine, the Chaparral was intended to be a versatile, if slightly more expensive machine. It had a top speed of 64 km per hour, which wasn't breaking any records, but it could keep up with other fire support units. While obviously not intended as a frontline battle tank, the Chaparral could make it over varied terrain in order to provide that crucial fire support far from heavier and clunkier artillery units. Grumman Industries designed the Chaparral with form and function in mind, but the decisions were guided by the desire to highlight the performance of the AIL Aero 4 missile launcher installed into the tank's body. Introduced just 11 years earlier, the Aero 4 system, along with its various missile types, offered a tantalizing solution for bringing artillery onto the battlefield away from more stationary batteries. In the few years before, during, and after the introduction of the Chaparral, the Aero 4 would see missiles designed to spread smoke, lay waste to areas with inferno liquid fire, laser weapon inhibiting smoke, cluster munitions, and the fast cam mine laying munitions. The options were almost endless. The 2 most common Aero 4 missiles were an area saturation missile, which targeted a specific set of coordinates, and the more expensive homing missile, which relied upon a targeting laser or tag system which could paint a moving target. As we know well from historical precedent in the first few decades of the 21st century, having accurate nearby missile support can be invaluable within a constantly shifting battlefield environment. The Chaparral was just the 27th century update to that reality. With 3 tons of ammunition stored in the body of the vehicle, the Chaparral could fire 15 times before needing to return to logistics lines. While not infinite, the 15 successfully fired Aero 4 missiles could lay waste to a considerable number of enemies. Because the Chaparral was expected to remain within close proximity to front lines, the tank was equipped with additional weaponry. The 2 standard Sapphire medium lasers were split between the left and right side of the vehicle. For anyone who might sneak up on the tank's 6 o'clock, a Shrike SRM-6 missile rack was added to the rear. This offered the possibility of a considerable punch, but also the possibility for other munition types as well. Deployment of the Chaparral was widespread before the Ameris coup and the subsequent First Succession War. However, like with so much other military technology lost during those years of ferocious and wanton destruction, the Chaparral was negatively impacted. Not necessarily this time due to the inability to produce the chassis itself, but due to the dwindling supply of those advanced Aero 4 missiles. With the rise of Comstar and their desire to hoard technology for themselves, replacements from the production lines on Terra were cut off for each of the great houses. As each of the succession states sought to pummel themselves into submission, the Chaparral was seen less and less frequently. Without ammunition for the Arrow 4, some attempted to retrofit the tank with other weapons loadouts. However, many more were mothballed for some later date when the Arrow 4s would make their return. A block and a half from the fort, Archer ordered his forces to stop and hold their fire. He sent flankers up the side streets in case Blucher thought he could still get away. The guards had lost most of their forces. A lone Chaparral tank, smoke rising from rents in its armor, sat next to Blucher's Atlas. A war-torn Kintaro also remained standing. Its back was to the granite wall, prepared for our last stand. Unfortunately, that day wouldn't arrive until the mid-31st century, when the technology to produce the Arrow 4 missiles was both rediscovered through the released memory cores as well as Comstar's opening of their Terran system production lines to outside purchasers in 3053. Since then, the Chaparral made a comeback across the House militaries and was even spotted among larger mercenary units who could both pay for and benefit from its use. While there were refits to the Chaparral, which included things like downgrading the rear-mounted SRM-6 to an SRM-4 in order to add an additional ton of Arrow 4 ammunition, there wasn't an official variant of the tank until 3062. It didn't see any structural changes and retained its movement speed, fusion engine, and in all but one case the 5.5 tons of standard armor. In fact, the only change to it was a downgrade of that previously mentioned SRM-6 with an SRM-4 in order to make room for a rear-facing machine gun and a half-ton of ammunition. This variant, logically called the MG variant, is a bit of an odd duck as it doesn't really change much, beyond perhaps allowing the tank to slightly better mow down infantry while the tank is running away. The 3064 SRM version of the Chaparral codified the previously mentioned SRM downgrade in order to add a fourth ton of Arrow 4 ammunition. Carrying 20 shots instead of 15 definitely helped improve the longevity of the tank in longer battles and on campaign. Overall, I'm fine with it because how often are you firing that rear-mounted SRM launcher anyway? The only version to include a structural change was introduced in 3071 and was known as the Case version, for reasons you can probably discern using your keen detection skills. It did see swap over to 5 tons of ferrofibrous armor, which provided 89 total, a whopping 1 additional armor over the original, but it did buy a half-ton of mass for use elsewhere. The weapons loadout mirrors the original Chaparral with the rear-facing SRM-6, 2 side medium lasers, and of course the Arrow 4 launcher. The only change was, well, you probably guessed it, the addition of case to the body of the vehicle, which offered the crew the potential for surviving should any of the ammunition housed within the vehicle undergo an unplanned rapid detonation event. The Chaparral ERML variant, made official in 3074, saw the return of the 5.5 tons of standard plate armor, and the only change on it was the upgrade of the OG standard medium lasers with the ER medium laser variety. While yes, this is a nice upgrade to the vehicle, many would be forgiven for expecting more of an overhaul of the design. As with so many other vehicles within the BattleTech universe, specific references to battles the Chaparral has affected are few and far between. In addition to the quote at the beginning of this video, there was a mention of the Chaparral used effectively when Little Richard's Panzer Brigade decided they would see how the Tauren Concordat would respond to an unexpected attack. Long story short, the Taurians responded quite ferociously. Baker Company, part of the Concordat Commandos, was tasked with shutting down a demi-company of panzers that were attempting to flank the commandos. While the bulk of the Taurian forces smashed into the Panzer Brigade, Baker Company, and more specifically the Chaparrals within Beta Platoon, rained down Arrow 4 missiles onto the wannabe flankers. When the Concordat's commandos began to lose ground in the main line, Beta Platoon turned their remaining missiles toward the advancing panzers, slowing the advance for long enough for the Concordat battlemechs to arrive and stabilize the line. It was a thrilling, if somewhat confusingly written tale. Thankfully, it seemed the Chaparral earned its keep that day. For the totally unofficial and non-canon Mechfrog variant, I decided to make a second-line clan refit for the platform. Beside the new clan fusion engine, it also received a big armor boost up to 8.5 tons of ferrofibrous plating. These 163 points of protection almost doubles the original's 88. With the installation of a lighter clan version of the Arrow 4 system, There was enough mass left over for the 4th ton of ammunition for it, along with 3 clan small pulse lasers and 1 clan medium pulse laser. The MPL was added to the front of the vehicle, and the SPLs were distributed 1 per the remaining sides. While obviously the tank is improved through the weight savings in clan weaponry and ferrofibrous armor, it still benefits greatly from a more reasonable distribution of secondary weaponry. That rear-mounted SRM-6 and sometimes 4 was just too much for a vehicle which would only rarely be able to use it, and only in the most dire of circumstances. With a front-facing laser, the MF can more realistically retreat, traveling backwards while still firing back with accuracy. While normally not a headline grabber for MVP in a fight, the Chaparral filled an important niche in battlefields across the inner sphere and into the periphery. The ability to provide mobile artillery support farther from logistics lines was invaluable, and I think the fact that the great houses held on to these tanks for decades in hope of once again bringing them out for fun is testament to their usefulness. Do you have a Chaparral tale of adventure and excitement? Have you ever used artillery in the battlefields of your BattleTech games? What do you think about the Klondike Chaparral MF? Let me know in the comments and we'll keep the conversation going. Thank you as always for coming by today to talk some BattleTech. It's been way too long since our last tank video, so I felt this was warranted. If you felt the video was worthy, hitting that like and subscribe button will make sure that the YouTube algorithm is happy, and as a result, you'll be much more likely to see my nonsense in the future. Going the extra step and becoming a channel member or supporting on Ko-Fi will go a long way to make sure I can keep this venture going. I really appreciate it and the opportunity to do my part to support the BattleTech community. With that, I'll say good day, please stay positive, and go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.